Phil talks taxes. He has been for over 40 years, and there isn't a human on the planet with more experience solving problems on behalf of taxpayers. He wants to solve your problem, whether you know you have one or not. So if you do have a tax problem, visit the website, TaxHelpOnline.com. If you don't have a tax problem, your current tax problem is the tax system itself. So let's get into the policy issues of today. Today, we're going to talk about the Taxpayers Defense Conference, which is the very first and inarguably the very best taxpayer representation focused seminar. Dan, how many years have you been doing the Taxpayers Defense Conference?
We've been doing this seminar since 1993, and it truly is, I'm convinced, the first one out there that ever focused exclusively on the representation of taxpayers before the IRS. This seminar is attended by attorneys, accountants, and enrolled agents, tax professionals, tax preparers, those tax pros that come into contact with their clients, and those clients need help dealing with an IRS problem. I teach these attorneys, accountants, enrolled agents, tax professionals how to represent their clients in front of the IRS. This has been going on since 1993.
This is, do the math for us, what year is it?
So this is the 32nd year of the Taxpayers Defense Conference. And I got to tell you something, Joshua, a couple of years ago, this program is approved by the IRS for continuing education credits. Attorneys and accountants need continuing education credits. Enrolled agents need continuing education credits. They've got to get 22 or 24 credits a year. The IRS approves certain organizations to provide those credits. Our organization, Taxpayer Defense Institute, is approved by the IRS to provide these certified credits to attendees. So when you need attorney, accountant, enrolled agent credits, you can get those credits through this seminar. We'll have this course approved for 14 continuing education credits as well as 2 ethics credits. We always have 2 ethics credits in our seminar. A couple of years ago, Josh, my organization went through an audit by the IRS's Office of Professional Responsibility to make sure that our programs were delivering what we said they would deliver. And so they looked at our materials, they looked at our text materials, they looked at our presentation materials and so on. But I believe I am the only organization that got a smiley face from the IRS's auditor about the quality of our programs. And they made the statement in an email to us that we are the only organization providing this kind of material to tax professionals. Now, that might be a little generous because I know there's other organizations that do this kind of thing, but we've been doing it longer and we do it better. There's no doubt about that. We provide a high level of education to attorneys and accountants. Some other organizations might be teaching at the 2nd or 3rd grade level. We teach at the college level and the graduate level as far as the quality and the context and the depth of our information. It is simply unmatched anywhere in the country.
The Associated Press once said you might know more about the IRS than the commissioner. I think that auditor, just with their smiley face, confirmed that you do in fact know more about the IRS than anyone in the IRS.
I certainly know more about the IRS than the most recent commissioner, Billy Long. You and I have talked about that in previous podcasts. He had no experience whatsoever. Of course, he's gone now. We don't have a new nominee yet that I know of. I've been checking, but there's no question I knew more about the IRS than that particular commissioner. That is undeniable.
All right, so let's walk through this itinerary for your Taxpayers Defense Conference, which is on what day?
We're going to do this October 23rd and 24th of 2025, so we're about 6 weeks out here.
Probably about 5 weeks from the time of posting this. If you are a tax professional, this is a little last minute, but get your tickets now. There's still availability. Are you doing the live version this year?
Yeah, we're going to do the live in-person version, so you'll have 2 opportunities. The live in-person version will be in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis right by the airport. That'll be on Thursday and Friday, October 23rd and 24th. We will be live streaming it as well. So if you can't make it to Minneapolis, you can sign up for the live stream version and you'll get just about as much out of the live stream as you get in the in-person version. Of course, the in-person version is much better because you get the interaction with the tax professionals that are there. You get fellowship and the networking and all the rest of that. You get the after hours questions. We hang out at the hotel together. We have breakfast together. We have dinner together. We have all of that fellowship that goes on that is also unmatched by any other seminar in the country because of this tight-knit group of individuals that have, some of these people, Josh, have been coming to my seminar for 25 and 30 years.
That's true. I seem to remember quite a few of the faces from this seminar. Day 1 is going to be on Thursday. Session 1 of of day one is going to be the IRS in transition, talking about what has been going on between the Biden expansions into the Trump cuts, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Every single seminar, Josh, I start with session one the first morning with what I colloquially call the State of the Union address. It's more accurately the state of the IRS. And right now we got the IRS in transition.
The
So
state of money, the state of the treasury.
I'm going to be talking about what happened with the Biden administration. They authorized $80 billion in IRS supplemental funding to hire 87,000 more IRS agents over the last couple of years. A lot of that money's been clawed back. There's been a fundamental change in the operation of the IRS as a result of that. I'm going to pay particular attention to the 2026 IRS appropriations. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at how that money breaks down and some administrative provisions in that appropriations bill that are going to affect how we deal with the IRS. So this is a very important session. It's overview, but it's very important to understand the context of what's going on with the agency going forward.
Session 2 on day 1 is titled Appeals Functions Generally.
The appeals office is a fundamentally important function in leveling the playing field between the IRS and the taxpayer. The theme of this year's conference, Josh, is appeals procedures. So there's going to be heavy focus, heavy emphasis on how to appeal decisions that from the IRS that we don't like. All right. So I'm going to introduce this process with an overview of the appeals process. What are the regulations that govern the appeals office? There are actually rules of procedure that the appeals office is supposed to follow that nobody has ever read. I've read them, of course, and I'm going to map those rules of procedure out and show you how to deal with the appeals office. There are certain cases that the appeals office has jurisdiction over, certain cases that the appeals office will not look at. We distinguish those cases so you know what can be appealed and what cannot be appealed. And then, of course, how do you negotiate with the appeals office? We'll be talking about that as well.
Session 3 says appeals CDP retrained jurisdiction. Those are a lot of big words.
Say that again, because it says
retained. Yeah, okay. All right. Session 3 says appeal CDP retained jurisdiction. So that's a lot of words. That sounds like jargon for who gets to have law somewhere.
And it is a lot of words that the IRS itself doesn't understand, Josh. CDP stands for Collection Due Process Appeal. The Collection Due Process Appeal procedure is the most important right that taxpayers have when dealing with the IRS in a collection situation. When the IRS files a tax lien or if they threaten a tax levy, the taxpayer has the right to a Collection Due Process Appeal handled by the Office of Appeals, and the Office of Appeals has to verify that the IRS followed proper administrative procedures in getting the assessment too invasive. They've got to balance the taxpayer's interest in not having collection be too invasive against the IRS's interest that the tax be collected as quickly as possible. The appeals office has to consider what are called collection alternatives. So if the IRS sends you a bill for $150,000 and they want all the money now or they're going to levy, the appeals office has to consider alternatives to enforced collection, such as an installment agreement, or maybe innocent spouse, or maybe there's an economic or financial hardship of some kind, or maybe you're entitled to penalty relief, or maybe you have to do an offer in compromise. All these things are considered collection alternatives that the appeals office has to evaluate. There is such a thing as retained jurisdiction. What that means is after the appeals office has issued its order, they retain the authority to make sure that order is enforced properly by the IRS. And very often, the appeals office says one thing and the IRS's collection function tries to do something else. So how do we get the appeals office back involved in the case to make sure that the IRS is following the rules properly? This retained jurisdiction is critical, and nobody, and I mean nobody, knows how this stuff works, not even the IRS's Office of Appeals. So we're going to break this down. I'm going to take it apart step by step and walk the attendees through how this works so that you have another arrow in your quiver when you're dealing with IRS enforced collection action.
Session 4 then talks about artificial intelligence, research, problems, and ethics. This is a big one this year because I seem to recall a few years back that you were so convinced that having a chatbot run the IRS was never going to happen. But a few years later, it actually might.
I was wrong about that. No question about that. And we got chatbots all over in the Internal Revenue Service's website right now. No question about that. But there's a whole other aspect of this thing, Josh, and that is the use of artificial intelligence tools outside of the Internal Revenue Service. These things like ChatGPT and the various other platforms that are out there to assist people with research and writing writing. This is a changing field. Now, this is going to constitute 2 hours of our ethics credits. So you're going to get your ethics credits out of this artificial intelligence session. We're going to break down how this research process works, how to use research in your writing, how to make sure that you don't fall into traps by using artificial intelligence that from time to time you use the phrase hallucinates. ChatGPT hallucinates from time to time. So we're going to talk about concerns about that. We're going to review the Bar Association rules on the use of in law practice and in the preparation of tax returns. This is a very quickly developing field, and we're going to give you examples of how to use artificial intelligence platforms to do research, what to be aware of, what to be cautious of, and how to avoid traps with AI.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is just making sure that that ChatGPT is telling you the correct information. Make it tell you a source, because those things will make up data just to make sure, just to sound right.
I've experienced that in my experimentation with ChatGPT and some of the things I've developed specifically for this seminar, Josh. I've experienced situations where ChatGPT just made up case law. So you got to be careful about this.
They have precedents with the IRS just making stuff up. Arguably, they're doing what they're supposed to there.
You got to be careful about relying on this stuff, if for no other reason that you can get into ethical problems with it.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So Section 5 then is the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act. The Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act is that conflagration of various bills that have been proposed, all of which are designed at giving taxpayers a little bit more teeth in dealing with the agency. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. In fact, you're right. We have talked about this quite at length on this podcast, but we haven't talked about it enough, in my opinion, because this really is going to be very helpful legislation. And there's a number of different parts of it. There's portions that deal with the appeals office, portions that deal with the taxpayer advocate's office, portions that deal with examination functions and general rules for the IRS that will help level the playing field. This is something I'm going to break down in great detail in the seminar. Well, we're going to focus on the Office of Appeals in this first part. There's actually two different parts of this Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act that I'm going to break down. This first part is going to talk specifically about the Office of Appeals and how this bill is going to enhance taxpayers' rights with respect to the Office of Appeals.
Now, Session 6 is a workshop that's more interactive and hands-on. You get into groups with people and make up cases and try to solve them.
We've had role-playing sessions in the past. More generally, we have this live interaction with all the attendees, right, where they have an opportunity to raise questions based on anything that we've talked about during the course of the first day. And so what I encourage tax professionals to do is bring your problem cases to the seminar, and you'll get feedback. Multiple people that have been in this business, some of them for 20 or 30 years, in my case, north of 45 years. So you'll get feedback and input on these difficult cases. So you bring your trouble cases to the conference and you'll go home with a solution.
So it's an hour-long live consultation Q&A, more or less.
Yep, exactly right. Yep.
Right, that's good. And then that's the end of the first day. The second day will be a Friday. Session 7, the first session of day 2. It says lien appeal procedure. And most people don't know what a lien is, so they probably don't have any idea what the appeal procedures are.
We're dealing with tax professionals in this seminar, right? Attorneys, accountants, enrolled agents generally know what a lien is, but here is something that most people don't know, and that is there's at least 3 procedures specifically built into the Internal Revenue Code to allow people to challenge a tax lien. Collection due process is one of them. The erroneous lien appeal is another one. A lien withdrawal request based on economic considerations is another. These are things that most people don't realize, Josh. One of the things I've done in this particular session is I have made a comprehensive list of all of the IRS forms and publications that deal specifically with these lien issues. So not only do I walk you through the process of executing these strategies, but I give you the forms and publications that are necessary as well. And this is very helpful, because if you don't know what form you're looking for, the IRS has thousands of tax forms. All right. Form numbers are in 5 digits, right? So there's thousands of these things, and people need to know, tax professionals need to know specifically what form they should be using and where the guidance comes from in the IRS's publications. So we're going to look at the controlling statutes and the Treasury regulate, cover this topic, and I will go through certain U.S. tax court decisions. One decision in particular that I got on my mind right now shows you specifically typically as a practitioner, what your burden of proof is when you're challenging an IRS lien. And this is a struggle because the burden of proof is always on the taxpayer. The IRS doesn't have to prove that their lien is proper. You have to prove that the lien is improper. What do you have to do to get the IRS to withdraw a lien? I look at the tax court decisions that address this issue, and I walk you right through that process.
The next one is cap appeals, and I'm going to assume that you're not talking about baseball hats.
No, we're not. We're talking about the collection appeal program, a cap appeal. The collection due process appeal is a statutory appeal. The cap appeal is an administrative appeal program that the IRS uses that is available at any time. If the IRS threatens to file a tax lien, it's available. If the IRS threatens to file a levy, wage levy or bank levy, it's available. If your collection due process appeal rights have run out, the cap appeal is available at that point in time, and it's available if the IRS threatens to revoke an installment agreement, refuses to grant an installment agreement, or tries to modify an installment agreement that you think is improper. So this cap appeal program is very important. The problem with the cap appeal is it's limited, and most people don't understand the limitations. So I'm going to go through the limitations. I'm going to show you where the cap appeals are successful and where they're not successful, and the circumstances under which to use the cap appeal program.
Sounds quite important, especially given the CDP importance. Then in Session 9, qualified settlement offers. Now, what is the difference between a qualified settlement offer and an offer in compromise? Or are they connected?
Well, there's a remarkable difference, and this is a good question. An offer in compromise comes into play when the taxpayer owes money to the IRS that they cannot afford to pay. So if you, let's say you got a $100,000 tax liability and you go into the IRS and say, look, guys, I owe you $100,000. There's no way I can pay that, but I can pay, let's say, $10,000. And the IRS does their asset and income investigation, and they come back and say, yeah, you're right, we'll agree to the $10,000. And basically they compromise based on that smaller number. That's an offer in compromise. A qualified settlement offer is something really different. If you've got a case going on with the IRS in the United States Tax Court, and you offer to settle that case, and the IRS rejects your offer, then you end up going further in the case, and you end up winning your case. The order shows that you owe less to the IRS than what you offered the IRS in settlement. You can actually recover attorney's fees. This is something that's going to help you with your clients because it shows you how to recover attorney's fees and costs through the qualified offer process. This is statutory, right? This is a procedure that's available under Section 7430 of the Internal Revenue Code that was added by the IRS Restructuring Act in 1998. The bill actually passed in 97, took effect in 98. This has been on the books for a long time, and there's not one lawyer in 1,000 that knows how this works. We're going to walk you through that so you enhance your capacity to recover fees and costs on behalf of your client when you win your case against the IRS.
Covering fees and costs is no joke. Section 10 says appeals mediation.
What the IRS calls fast track mediation. This is an intermediate step between the audit process and the appeals process. If you've got a situation where you believe that you can reach some kind of a settlement with the IRS, fast track mediation is effective at speeding up the process and getting your case resolved quickly. It's available when there's a legitimate dispute, room for movement on both sides. It's typically not available when your client is dug in and you say, I just simply don't know. But if there's some gray area in these cases, and a lot of times there's gray area, you can sit down with a mediator, a specially trained appeals officer, through this fast track mediation program to reach a settlement that is quick and fair and keeps you out of court.
Session 11 here is blank, and Session 12 says Tax Solutions Workshop. So another one of those.
Okay, let's go back to Session 11. This is the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act Part 2 is what I'm going to do.
And then Session 11 says Taxpayer
Assistance and Service Act.
Session 11 says Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act Part 2, because it's so important you have to hit it twice.
We're going to talk about different things in the context of this Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act. In Part 1, we're going to talk about appeals. In Part 2, I'm going to talk about the taxpayer advocate and the collection due process appeal. There are significant changes proposed. This bill will fundamentally change the collection due process appeal and tax court jurisdiction. For example, the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act will change tax court jurisdiction to to give tax court the authority to hear refund cases, paid the money in, and refund cases in the context of collection due process appeals. This is very exciting. It's very important. I'm really anxious for Congress to pass this law. I know they're going to do it. And so this is something that we are going to stay on the cutting edge of so that tax professionals know what the additional authority is and the tools that they will have available to help their clients now more than ever.
And then your closing session is basically another Q&A session, but that is about all we've got for today, taxpayers. So remember to go and pester your congresspeople about the Taxpayers Assistance and Service Act. Make sure you share this video with them. If you're not a tax pro and you're seeing this video, come to the Tax Pro convention anyways and learn how to be a tax pro. I bet you could get yourself a brand new career.
Should I do my outro?
Let me lead you. Sorry, I went off onto a weird tangent there.
Got excited, Josh. You
got excited. Listen, people, you could genuinely go to this tax conference with no knowledge of how any of the tax industry, tax representation industry works. Come out a functioning tax professional. Would you argue with that?
It'd be tough to just go to one of my seminars and be a functioning tax professional.
They could get your books and then they'd be good.
Because this is high level stuff, Josh. It really is.
That'll be all for today, taxpayers. Thanks for watching. And don't forget, there is no such thing as a hopeless tax case. If you think yours is the exception, get a hold of Dan here. Although if you're still watching this video, you're probably a tax professional. So definitely check out the website. Get your tickets for the Taxpayers Defense Conference. Dan, tell them where else they can follow along with your taxpayers' rights.
Follow me at Pillow Talks Taxes. I'm on the social media outlets, Talk, YouTube, right here on Facebook. Pillow Talks Taxes is my handle on social media. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Truth Social. Follow me at Pillow Talks Taxes. I'm primarily on TikTok, Facebook, Truth Social, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and share these videos, especially with your federal representatives and senators. If you've got a tax problem, go to my website, TaxHelpOnline.com. Get the help you need. Friends, if you're a tax professional, go to that website, Tax Help Online. Click on the Tax Pros section, and you'll get information about the Taxpayers Defense Conference.